Think getting famous means you can't get into trouble? Think again. These are the celebs who fought the law and lost. By 1984, Motley Crue had earned a reputation as one of the hardest drinking bands in the party-hard Los Angeles hair metal scene. One evening, singer Vince Neil had been enjoying a multi-day drinking binge at a beach house in the LA area, a party held by Motley Crue in honor of the Finnish band Hanoi Rocks. On the night of December 8, 1984, the party's liquor stocks were running low, and Neil, while heavily intoxicated, offered to drive to a store and pick up some more. He brought along his new friend, Hanoi Rocks drummer Razzle, and set out on a mission. A winding road was too much for Neil to handle though, and he swerved out of control into two other cars. One vehicle's driver broke 3 limbs, went into a coma for 3 weeks, and developed a susceptibility to seizures. The car's passenger broke a leg and suffered brain damage. The other car's driver was left unhurt, while Neil cracked a couple of ribs. Razzle, however, died during the crash. After being arrested on the scene, Neil was charged with drunk driving and vehicular manslaughter. In 1985, he was convicted of these charges. He was ordered to pay $2.6 million to his victims, perform community service, and spend a grand total of 20 days in jail. As one half of the comedy duo Cheech and Chong, Tommy Chong was a trailblazer in the world of stoner comedy, recording a string of LPs in the 70s and starring in movies like Up in Smoke and Nice Dreams. Chong's persona was that of an aging hippie who smoked so much weed as to be forever absent-minded, and he capitalized on that image by starting a business called Nice Dreams Enterprises. Established in an era before widespread legalized recreational marijuana, Chong's retail and online store sold glass pipes and other materials that could be used in the act of smoking weed. And before long, the company attracted the attention of the DEA. In 2003, the agency arrested 50 people, including Chong, as part of a sting operation targeting Nice Dreams Enterprises.
And they said, "Mr. Chong, do you have any marijuana in the house?" And I said, "Yeah."
Chong entered a guilty plea on the drug charges. He was subsequently convicted and sentenced to a 9-month term in federal prison. Still, if nothing else, his time behind bars didn't seem to have been terribly unpleasant.
You get computers, you got you got your nice, comfortable cubicle. It was great. It was great.
Robert Downey Jr. is arguably the most famous actor in the world right now, but it's easy to forget that he once spent years in a downward spiral of addiction and criminality.
When I was, locked down in a California correctional facility, I said, wow, this is really not panning out for me.
In June 1996, police in Malibu pulled over a swerving, speeding pickup driven by Downey. An initial search uncovered heroin, cocaine, and a concealed weapon, all arrestable offenses. About a month later, Downey stood in front of a court to address those charges. Hours after that, he was arrested again, having entered a home in Malibu and gone to sleep in his spare bedroom. Arrested this time for trespassing and being intoxicated with heroin, Downey was sent to a hospital's incarceration unit before being released. A judge later sentenced Downey to attend an inpatient drug rehabilitation program, but that wasn't the end of it either. Downey then broke out of the facility. After being recaptured, he was held for 9 days at the Los Angeles County Men's Central Jail. After more court appearances, Downey was ordered into another 6 months of rehab, plus probation. When he violated his probation by failing to submit to drug tests, he received a sentence of 180 days in jail. He was eventually released on the condition that he submit to further drug tests, but he failed to do this too. As a result, in 1999, a judge sent him to the California Substance Abuse Treatment Facility and State Prison for a period not exceeding 3 years. He was released in 2000 and finally went sober in 2003. He has since credited his recovery to therapy, meditation, recovery programs, and the stalwart support of his wife, Susan. Before Home Improvement made him one of the biggest TV stars of the 90s, Tim Allen had been an 80s stand-up comic, honing the routines about gender roles and macho behavior that would later inform his hit series. Before that, he'd been a drug dealer.
I eventually succumbed to it, where I was getting greedy and I was doing my own stuff.
In October 1978, 25-year-old Timothy Allen Dick was stopped and searched at the Kalamazoo Battle Creek International Airport in Michigan. He was found to be carrying 650 grams or 1.4 pounds of cocaine. Legally, that amount is significant enough to imply the intent to distribute, and Allen later pleaded guilty to a federal charge of drug trafficking. The crime was of such severity that he could have been sentenced to life behind bars. Instead, though, he made a deal with prosecutors, turning state's evidence and passing along the names of his associates in the drug trade. In return, Allen's term was reduced to 3 to 7 years. He was paroled following 28 months served at the Federal Correctional Institution in Sandstone, Minnesota. Sean Penn burst onto the scene in the 80s as an intriguing performer who, outside of his work, couldn't seem to stay out of trouble. In 1987, he was arrested for assaulting a man at a Los Angeles nightclub who Penn believed had kissed his then-wife, Madonna. Penn got off with a $1,700 fine and a year of probation. Several months later, he was found to be in violation of his probation due to another violent outburst. Between shooting takes of the movie Colors in Venice Beach, California, an extra named Jeffrey Klein had taken some photographs of Penn and co-star Robert Duvall. Penn took offense, cursing and spitting at Klein. The extra spat back at him, prompting Penn to repeatedly punch Klein in the face. Crew members and other actors had to physically remove him from the situation. Around the same time, Penn was stopped by police after driving through a red light. He plea bargained what would have been a drunk driving charge down to a count of reckless driving. Due to the nature of these back-to-back incidents, a judge sentenced Penn to 60 days in Los Angeles County Men's Central Jail, along with an extension of his parole to 2 years and in order to attend 6 months of anger management training. Kelsey Grammer's big break came when he joined the cast of NBC's Cheers in its 3rd season in 1984, portraying the snooty and uptight psychiatrist Dr. Frasier Crane. Grammer appeared on Cheers for the rest of its run and later starred in the hit spin-off Frasier and its reboot. Throughout his first Frasier Crane era, Grammer faced issues with illegal drug use. In 1987, he was arrested in Southern California on a drunk driving charge. He avoided prison time by entering a no-contest plea and agreeing to complete an alcohol rehab program. Grammer neglected to do that, though. After a judge issued a warrant for the actor's arrest in 1990, he was sentenced to 30 days behind bars and 10 days of community service. Several weeks later, Grammer found himself standing before a judge yet again. This time, he was sentenced to 90 days of house arrest for failing to complete a drug rehabilitation program, a caveat of a plea deal for a previous drug charge.
Any kind of addiction is really the result of unresolved grief. And that has held true for me.
In the 90s, Dustin Diamond was famous for exactly one project. From 1988 to 2000, he played awkward nerd genius Screech Powers across 4 series and 2 TV movies in the Saved by the Bell universe. In the 21st century, though, you were more likely to see him appearing on reality TV shows or landing himself in trouble with the law. On December 26, 2014, police in Wisconsin arrested Diamond for an incident that had occurred on Christmas Day. During a bar fight, he had allegedly stabbed and wounded a man with a folding knife, which was later found in the actor's SUV. Diamond faced charges of second-degree reckless endangerment, disorderly conduct, and carrying a concealed weapon. Convicted of the second 2 misdemeanors and cleared of the first felonious charge in 2015, Diamond was sentenced to 4 months in jail. He was paroled after 3 months behind bars. In May 2016, Diamond briefly returned to jail due to a parole violation, the nature of which was not publicly disclosed. A teen idol of the 80s and early 90s, Christian Slater earned his reputation as a Hollywood troublemaker. On screen, he played miscreants, rebels, and ne'er-do-wells in movies like Heathers, Pump Up the Volume, and Young Guns 2. In real life, he amassed a rap sheet filled with serious crimes, some of which would land him behind bars. In 2 different incidents in 1988 and 1989, Slater was arrested for driving while intoxicated. In the second incident, Slater tried to flee from police. When cornered in an alley in West Hollywood, he reportedly kicked one of the officers attempting to arrest him. A no-contest plea to drunk driving and evading arrest allowed prosecutors to drop the other charges, and Slater was sent to jail for 10 days. Then, in August 1997, Slater became so rowdy at a party in Los Angeles that the hosts decided to call the police. The actor claimed to have no recollection of his actions that night, which reportedly involved punching one guest, biting another, kicking a custodian in the stomach, and then assaulting a responding police officer. For all that, Slater spent 59 days in a California jail. Few musicians made more of a splash in the late 2000s than Lil Wayne. His album, The Carter 3, was the #1 selling LP of 2008, and it later won the Grammy for Best Rap Album. Meanwhile, the single Lollipop topped the pop charts, and even President Barack Obama identified himself as a fan. Through it all, though, Lil Wayne was dealing with a number of serious legal issues. When he headlined a concert in July 2007, police in New York reportedly smelled marijuana smoke coming from Lil Wayne's tour bus. After investigating, they discovered a handgun they claimed belonged to the rapper. In October 2009, Lil Wayne entered a guilty plea to a count of felony gun possession, and in March 2010, he began serving a 1-year sentence at Rikers Island. Weeks before his scheduled release, he was sent to solitary confinement after guards found banned audio equipment in his cell. All told, Lil Wayne spent 8 months in prison. Kiefer Sutherland has always played fairly intense characters, generally complex anti-heroes or straight-up villains. He's also been quite open about his own personal failings and mistakes.
Now, the only bad things that have ever happened to me in my life have been because I like to go to bars and have drinks with my friends.
Over the past 4 decades, Sutherland has amassed a rap sheet made up primarily of charges related to drunk driving. In 1989, he was arrested and charged with drunk driving and carrying a loaded concealed weapon. He avoided jail time after submitting a no-contest plea to a count of alcohol-related reckless driving. 4 years later, after being caught again driving under the influence, Sutherland chose to fulfill a 211-hour community service requirement rather than a 12-day jail term. In the 2000s, Sutherland ran afoul of the law for drunk driving again. In 2004, he received probation, a fine, and court-ordered rehab after submitting a no-contest plea. While still on probation for that case in 2007, Los Angeles police again arrested Sutherland for failing a field sobriety test after he was caught making an unlawful U-turn in Beverly Hills. Due to that incident, Sutherland spent 48 days in the Glendale City Jail. Mark Wahlberg committed his first crimes long before he entered showbiz. In 1986, the Attorney General's Office of Massachusetts lodged a civil action against 15-year-old Wahlberg and 2 others for harassing 3 black children. They allegedly yelled racial epithets at the children, threw rocks at them, and chased them on their mopeds. The trio were said to have committed similar acts the next day, targeting one of the same victims when they encountered him on a school field trip. Wahlberg avoided prison for those acts, but he ended up behind bars 2 years later. In 1988, a Vietnamese man exited his car in Dorchester and was approached by Wahlberg, who racially abused him before beating him so hard that it required hospitalization. Later that day, Wahlberg assaulted another Vietnamese individual by punching him in the eye. Arrested on suspicion of attempted murder, Wahlberg admitted to the attack. He entered a guilty plea for the lesser charge of felony assault and was sent to prison for 45 days.
I've been working for 27 years to right the wrongs that I've done and the mistakes that I've made as a child. And, those are things that affected me deeply.
Stacy Keach made a career out of playing tough guys, and in early 1984, he began starring as a hard-boiled private eye on Mickey Spillane's Mike Hammer. Just a few months into the show's run, Keach flew to London for a Mike Hammer soundtracking session. He reportedly brought along a sizable personal stash of cocaine, about 1.3 ounces. Keach had attempted to hide the drugs in a can of shaving cream. Arrested by police at Heathrow Airport, Keach and his assistant, Deborah Steele, were both charged with drug trafficking. Released but ordered to return for a trial, Keach later pleaded guilty to the crime and was sentenced to 9 months in prison. He began serving the term right away after an appeal was dismissed by a Lord Chief Justice. In total, Keach spent 6 months in prison, during which he was able to move past his cocaine addiction. Speaking about his arrest, Keach later told Fox News, "I think subconsciously I was hoping to get caught. Looking back, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. It saved my life, actually."
How did all of this trouble begin?
Living in America.
James Brown spent time in prison both before and after he became known as the Godfather of Soul. Raised in rural South Carolina, Brown went to a juvenile detention facility for the first time when he was a teenager, set to serve 8 years on charges of breaking into vehicles, although he was paroled after 3. Brown returned to prison about 40 years later. In 1987, he invaded the office of an insurance company located next to his own office in Augusta, Georgia. High on PCP, Brown brandished a shotgun and complained that the office's employees had been allowed the use of his restroom. Staff called police and Brown fled, forcing authorities to chase him into South Carolina. Police shot out his front tires, forcing Brown to drive on his truck's rims for several miles, but he was eventually detained. Charged with fleeing police, presenting a deadly weapon, and driving under the influence of drugs, Brown was sentenced to 6 years in the State Park Correctional Center of South Carolina. He was paroled in February 1991. Tupac Shakur was arguably the most prominent West Coast artist during the gangster rap era of the early 90s. His often bleak and sometimes celebratory tracks about the Los Angeles underground came from a truthful place too. Shakur had been arrested on 6 occasions for violent crimes between 1993 and 1995.
I don't really believe in my heart that I belong in jail. I don't believe I did anything to warrant me going to jail.
That said, he faced a long prison term for only one of those incidents. In a New York City hotel room in November 1993, Shakur and 3 others allegedly sexually assaulted a female fan. The rapper had been intimate with the woman on a previous occasion, leading to the defense's claim that the act was consensual, despite Shakur's pleas of innocence to the court and in public. He and one of his associates, road manager Charles Fuller, were found guilty of first-degree sexual abuse. They were found not guilty on related charges. Shakur served 9 months at the Clinton Correctional Facility of Dannemora, New York. After the Beatles broke up in 1970, Paul McCartney formed a new band, Paul McCartney and Wings. Putting out 7 albums and plenty of hit songs, Wings became one of the most popular bands of the 70s, touring extensively through the decade, and in January 1980, Wings went to Japan, where they planned to play 11 shows in just 13 days. When McCartney arrived in Tokyo on January 16th, airport authorities discovered about half a pound of marijuana on him, a serious offense in Japan at the time. Immediately arrested and detained for what looks to be an indefinite period of time, McCartney had his promoters cancel all of Wings' concerts in the country. Meanwhile, McCartney awaited trial from his cell. If convicted, he could have been handed down the maximum sentence, 7 years in a labor camp. He made a lucky escape from this fate, though, as the Japanese courts decided to release and deport him after just 10 days spent in jail. He may have preached peace and love as a member of Crosby, Stills and Nash, but David Crosby ran into a fair amount of trouble over the years, much of which was related to the illegal possession of drugs and weapons. Following the assassination of John Lennon in 1980, Crosby began carrying a handgun. In March 1982, he was driving to an anti-nuclear protest near San Diego when he ran his vehicle into a freeway divider. Crosby was intoxicated on cocaine at the time, and after he was pulled from the wreckage, police found more cocaine and Crosby's loaded gun. Charged with driving under the influence of cocaine, drug possession, drug paraphernalia possession, and possessing a concealed weapon, Crosby arranged for a plea deal. He entered a guilty plea on a lesser count of reckless driving and accepted probation instead of prison. Crosby was later arrested in Texas after cocaine and a loaded pistol were found in his dressing room at the Dallas venue Cardi's. After a plea bargain-related rehab stint failed to work out, Crosby was sentenced to 2 concurrent prison terms, 5 years on the drug offenses and 3 for the gun crimes.
They gave me a sentence of 5 years in the Texas State Penitentiary for a minuscule amount of things that.
He reported to prison in March 1986 and was released after 5 months. Out of all the bad boys who kickstarted the outlaw country movement, only Merle Haggard could claim to be a true convicted criminal. Haggard's life story led to some of the most enduring country music hits, such as Mama Tried, The Bottle Let Me Down, and Okie from Muskegee. And he took his aspirations of musical stardom seriously after finding inspiration behind bars. Having been involved in a series of juvenile crimes, 14-year-old Haggard was sent to jail for 2 weeks after stealing a car with a friend. For repeated school truancy, he was sent to a labor camp and then a highly secured juvenile detention facility. He escaped from both. His run of petty crimes and incarcerations continued after that, including a 9-month spell in California's Ventura County Jail for auto theft. Then, in December 1957, Haggard tried to rob a diner in Bakersfield. He thought the restaurant was closed when he tried to bust open a back door lock, but was chased off by the owner. He was arrested soon after, escaped from the Bakersfield jail, and then reapprehended once more. After that, he was sentenced to 3 years in the notorious San Quentin State Prison. While an inmate there, Haggard was able to attend a concert given by Johnny Cash, which inspired him to get back into the music in which he'd once dabbled.
When Cash left, there was guys all over that yard with guitars.
Haggard gave guitar lessons to other prisoners. After his parole in 1960, he began to pursue music as a profession. As one of the very first rock and roll stars, Chuck Berry ran up a slew of hits in the 50s, including School Day, Johnny B. Good, and Sweet Little 16. By the end of the decade, though, Berry wasn't topping the charts much anymore, and so he parlayed some of his fortune into opening a nightclub in St. Louis. During a trip to Mexico in 1959, Berry reportedly met 14-year-old Janice Escalante and offered her a job in the hat check room at his establishment. Berry took Escalante back to St. Louis, but eventually fired her from the gig. Escalante went to the St. Louis police, alleging that Berry had sexually assaulted her a total of 14 times during the journey from Mexico to Missouri, and then at his home in St. Louis. The court tried Berry on charges that he violated the Mann Act, a law passed in 1910 to fight interstate commercial sex work. The act disallowed the transport of women across state lines for immoral purposes, and it was only ever enforced selectively, particularly against black men and celebrities. In March 1960, an entirely white jury convicted Berry and sentenced him to 5 years in prison. 6 months later, Berry received a new trial on appeal following racist comments made by the first judge. The conviction was upheld, and Berry wound up in prison for 2 years. Once upon a time, MTV mostly played music videos, but this era came to an end when executives realized they could bring in more viewers by airing full-length TV shows, including reality programs like Jersey Shore.
I don't care what you guys do!
Obviously you do!
You guys are such instigators, man.
One of the breakout stars of the notorious and iconic series was Mike Sorrentino, or as he preferred to be called, The Situation. Appearing on Jersey Shore earned Sorrentino a small fortune, but he soon ran afoul of the law after failing to pay the tax bill on his sky-high earnings. In 2011, Sorrentino filed a fraudulent tax return via his personal corporation, Situation Nation, as a way to hide some of his wages. Sorrentino's accountant confessed to his role in the scheme, and Sorrentino was subsequently indicted on a series of financial charges. In total, Sorrentino was found to have evaded some $8.9 million in income tax. After entering a guilty plea in order to obtain a lighter punishment, he was handed an 8-month federal prison sentence along with a fine, community service, and probation. For most of 2019, he was incarcerated at the Otisville Correctional Facility in Orange County, New York. Long before he joined Australian hard rock juggernaut AC/DC, singer Bon Scott was something of a wayward youth. By the age of 15, Scott had dropped out of school, taking on a series of jobs as a scale mechanic, fisherman, and farm worker. He also got involved in Melbourne's crime gangs. Within months, he worked his way up to a leadership position in one of those organizations. Also an active consumer of alcohol, marijuana, and amphetamines at the time, Scott once took violent revenge on a police officer who beat up a member of his gang. Scott escaped prison for that assault, but he wasn't so lucky when he was arrested at 16 for a long list of crimes, including performing an illegal sex act, lying to police about his name and address, escaping custody, and gasoline theft. In 1963, he was made a ward of Australia's Child Welfare Authority, which oversaw Scott as he served a sentence of 1 year at Riverbank Juvenile Detention Center, a maximum security facility for offenders under the age of 18. There hadn't been a mainstream boxing superstar for a long time when Mike Tyson hit the circuit in 1985. Iron Mike won his first 37 bouts, which included 10 heavyweight titles and defenses. An undisputed champion by the age of 20, Tyson began to falter in 1990 when he lost the crown to Buster Douglas. He disappeared from professional boxing entirely between 1991 and 1995, mostly because he spent most of that time dealing with his many legal troubles. At the 1991 Miss Black America pageant in Indianapolis, Tyson had sexually assaulted an 18-year-old contestant. Tyson later insisted that the encounter was consensual, but his victim's testimony claimed otherwise. A jury convicted Tyson in February 1992 on 3 counts, and the boxer received a 10-year sentence with 4 years suspended to be served at the Indiana Youth Center. Tyson spent a total of 3 years behind bars. If you or anyone you know needs help with addiction issues, visit the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration website or contact SAMHSA's National Helpline at 1-800-662-HELP 4357.